Now, it was a scandal that shocked British society, the abuse of more than 1,400 girls by grooming gangs in Rotherham between 1997 and 2003.
Now, a survivor of those terrible events is using her own experience to educate young people on sex grooming. Sky's Katie Spencer reports.
I kind of felt like it was a little bit cool to be, hanging about with somebody a little bit older.
Sammy Woodhouse was 14 when the grooming began.
When I got into his car, I never thought for 1 second that that moment were going to change my life forever.
The same age as many of the students she now talks to.
Sometimes hear the gasps and, they are really shocked. And in fact, I've just been talking to one young girl and she said, I thought stuff like this only happened on a big screen.
Her evidence to police in 2013 triggered an investigation that would ultimately expose the Rotherham sex grooming scandal.
Once I was involved in his world, it was very, very hard to get out of.
The sexual exploitation of impressionable teenagers dating back to 1997, abuse, beatings, rape and abductions.
I have to be age appropriate. I can't share my full story to children because it'll just scare them, and it's important that children learn through education, not through fear.
We feel that it's important to develop our students in terms of their safety and awareness, not just for their lives within the academy, but outside as well within the community. So it's about raising awareness and taking the power away from perpetrators.
20 men were jailed for almost 300 years for the abuse. Sammy's evidence helped identify 1,400 child victims.
I feel sorry from what she said, it's upsetting what happened to her.
It's just really scary to hear because you would be really scared if you heard it, if it happened to you.
Ash, so that's the man I thought I loved and that loved me.
As well as sharing her story, Sammy is still petitioning for a change in law. She believes pardoning child sex abuse victims for crimes they committed while groomed could bring about more prosecutions.
I think the government are now listening. It's now in their hands. I think I've done, all I can do, apart from just now put on a little bit of pressure. I'm still waiting for that meeting for Amber Road, but I am meeting with Ministry of Justice and with the Home Office to try and get it passed over to the Law Commission.
In the meantime, Sammy hopes others can learn from her story.
The people that need to be blamed are the people that commit the crime.
Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, joining us now from Barnsley in Yorkshire is the child abuse and sexual exploitation specialist, Adele Gladman. Welcome to you, Adele. A very brave young woman there, presumably very helpful, what she's doing.
Absolutely. I think that the more children that we can reach to actually raise awareness of what grooming is, of what predatory behaviour is, the more chance we have of children actually being able to identify risk and avoid it. And that's not about putting the responsibility on young people's shoulders. It's about giving them education in the same way that we do about crossing the road, healthy diets, everything else that we do to enable them to have abuse-free childhoods.
How does a young person know? What are the main telltale signs if they are being groomed?
I think the most important thing that we can teach children is to trust their instincts, and if something doesn't feel right, if something feels unsafe, then generally speaking that instinct is usually pretty true and pretty accurate. So a big part is about teaching them different strategies of what they can do in those situations. But also I think the more we can tell them about some of the grooming techniques that are commonly used, the more we can help them identify that in the first place.
What are some of those grooming techniques that are commonly used as you describe?
Well, quite often predators, and this is particularly true of online as well, offline predators, will try and find a child who is experiencing issues, who is maybe going online and talking about those kind of things, who maybe looks isolated within their friendship group. And what they will typically try and do is befriend that young person and make them believe that they have a relationship where that person cares about them, is genuinely acting in their interests. And you've just heard Sammy say about how she genuinely believed that she was in a loving relationship with her abuser. There are lots of different models out there, but they all have that in common. It is that gaining the trust of the child and making them believe that what's happening is actually a safe and caring place for them to be.
One of the really shocking things about Rotherham and indeed the other places where similar things have been going on is that it was going on really under the noses of the general public, families. What can the general public really look for in knowing whether something just isn't right?
I think that is a really good question and a very pertinent one, because, I think we've certainly got to a stage in this country where professionals now are well equipped to recognise the signs of grooming and recognise abuse and know what to do about it. I think communities and the general public, I think we've got a bit further to go, to be honest. And while we have some very well-informed members of the public out there, I think we still focus very much on young people's behaviour rather than the behaviour of people around them. So I think the more work we can do, broadcasts such as this, to keep it on the agenda, to keep it in public dialogues, to raise that awareness is incredibly important. And I think the key message for me is about, irrespective of what you might think you're saying, it's about a child. And if it was a child in your family that was in that position, you would want somebody to act.
Now, Sammy Woodhouse was calling there for a change in the law. Do you think one is required? And if so, what should that change be?
I think it's quite a difficult question, and I think it really does depend on the nature of the crime, to be honest. I don't think it's quite as simple as being suggested. But we know from the Office of the Children's Commissioner, for example, that part of an abusive process in the past has been encouraging young people to commit criminal acts such as shoplifting, affray, drunken disorderly, things that they are then criminalised for. And I think we need a better understanding in the youth justice system about interrogating behaviour. What is it telling us? What's going on for that person? And using those opportunities to address what's going on in that young person's life. But as I said, I think it really does depend on the nature of the crime and harm done to others, because there has to be accountability for that, sadly.
Adele Gladman, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.